Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. Today we meet Chris R., originally from Saskatchewan, Canada. Chris has been living in Japan now for over 25 years, and today he attends AA meetings at the Freethinkers AA group in Tokyo. This was a fun conversation. You'll find Chris is smart, thoughtful, with a great sense of humor. I think you'll enjoy this episode very much. And without further ado, Chris R.
Originally, actually, I'm from Canada.
Oh, really?
Yes. I started kind of drinking when I was in high school. I had kind of a somewhat religious, upbringing because my father was a priest in the Anglican church in Canada. And so I did some drinking in high school. Didn't get, nothing too out of control, but of course, I never really drank normally. And then in 1985, I was an exchange student to Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I found out...
in college?
Just before college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was a high school exchange student. And I found out, because, Saskatchewan, or where I was living, actually... The city I lived in was originally founded as a temperance colony.
Oh, wow.
So, and a lot of that was still, these days in Canada, it's pretty wide open in terms of drinking, but now, at that time, there was still a lot of hangover from this kind of temperance movement. And so you couldn't buy liquor. Until I got out of high school, you couldn't buy liquor on a Sunday. And no bars were open on Sunday, and there are all kinds of restrictions. And so I came to Japan, and they don't have any of that. Liquor is everywhere, and most people, because most Japanese people don't really have much. The rate of, it's not that it doesn't exist, but the rate of alcoholism is much lower in Japan, and so they don't have many restrictions on it. In fact, the thing that really, just blew me away was they have beer vending machines. It's not as popular now, but that's only because there's 24-hour convenience stores that sell liquor all hours.
Okay.
So it's not really so much practical. But the first time I saw this beer vending machine, it's just what? I just couldn't believe it. So obviously I had to be in Japan.
Yeah.
Then, I came back to Japan on the JEP program, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And I, of course, drank quite a lot then. Still pretty in control. Now that I reflect on, just ridiculous. It's ridiculous quantities. Of course, I didn't really, I think that's one of the reasons I'd have to say I'm an alcoholic, because, I didn't really ever think, well, this is totally crazy.
Right.
There were times where, things would get out of hand, right? And then I'd think, oh, well, maybe this is kind of crazy. But for the most part, it never occurred to me that, I remember the first time I took they set up a booth for responsible drinking. I was at the University of British Columbia at the time studying Japanese, and I took this little quiz they had. It was self-administered on a computer. And I was really shocked at the end of it because it said you have a severe problem with alcohol. Because it asked me my opinions about things, and I was just what? It's just I couldn't believe that. And so I would say, actually, though, in my story, I would say the first time I really had an inkling was actually not so much from drinking, but from trying not to drink.
Yeah.
Because when I started law school, I was okay, well, now I did this, partying or whatever, which is kind of a stage, I guess a lot of people I was around kind of went through. And then I tried to stop completely, and I just started going downhill mentally. I was having all these anxiety attacks. I just felt really crappy, but then eventually I started drinking again, and that all kind of went away. But because I was in school, that kind of disciplined me. I didn't drink every day.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, go on binges every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
Then after law school, I got the Mombusho scholarship to study in Japan. I went to Hokkaido University. Then things really kind of, started to really get out of control.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really have to apply myself, because compared to being in law school, the graduate school was kind of a joke.
Okay.
Most of the stuff, like I would take courses where the materials were in English, but because everybody's Japanese and so they got to translate everything, it's like instead of reading hundreds and hundreds of pages, it's like 20 pages or something.
Yeah.
I would read it in a couple of hours, and that would be all the work for the semester.
Wow.
For the seminar. And then you just got to show up, and you don't even have to. And you don't even have to be awake, really. I slept through a lot of them, but anyway, and then I graduated from, but still, I guess because because it still had built up to the point where it's like really a problem. And then I kind of really reached a kind of a new point where when I was in after 2001, after 9/11 in October. I just remember, because this is how like my mind was working at the time, because somebody drove me, I went out drinking, and then I got a cab with somebody, and I got dropped off at the right place, but then I was blacked out. And so the next thing I know, I was like in jail.
Yeah.
It was like, which was kind of like, wow, because that never happened to me before. So like it was very shocking.
Yeah.
But then what I thought was, oh, well, this is because your reaction to 9/11,
Yeah.
you're very sensitive. Not that I had any real connection to 9/11 particularly. Right. Like I didn't even know a person who knew a person kind of level. Like
yeah.
It was just like, that was just my rationalization of it. And so I continued. And then after a while you think, oh, well, it's kind of a funny story or whatever.
Yeah.
But then that became more common. And then I remember, like, in the year that I quit drinking, which was 2005, on St. Patrick's Day, I ended up in the drunk tank or whatever. And it was kind of a relief, because in Japan you're in an individual cell.
Okay.
And so I was just lying there. I got up. I go, oh, okay, this is jail.
Yeah.
And I thought, good, because they got all my stuff. I don't, at the desk, so I don't need to worry about anything. And I just went back to sleep. And then finally they woke me up. But
so what's it culturally in Japan and legally? How seriously do they take like offenses, drinking offenses?
Not seriously.
Okay, all right. Not like in the U.S. or Canada.
No. I mean, I kind of wonder, like, because like in Canada, you got to stand before the man when they charge you for public disorderly conduct or public drunkenness or whatever. In Japan, each time it was just like I would get a warning.
Okay.
They would say, like, don't come back. And they would just release. They don't generally like, I mean, that's just the trend of their criminal system. They don't really, as much as possible, they don't prosecute crimes. Okay. So, I mean, the one thing I knew, though, is one thing they like to do is get you fired. And so I never carried any name cards with me. And if they asked me if I had a job, I would say I'm unemployed.
There you go. Okay.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah. That's because that works much more than just a fine or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they tell your employer, and then you got to straighten up.
Okay.
Right? It's a kind of more of a shame society, particularly if they fire you from your job.
Oh yeah, which is what happened to me.
Then you're supposed to then you're supposed to like straighten up. Well, actually, though, that's funny, because like I'm a lawyer, and so I was working for this law office as an editor. And then they picked me up. Like I had this argument with a taxi driver, kind of a Bill W. thing.
Right, it sounds right out of the big book.
Yeah, and then so they took me to the police station, and I said, like, I was just really wasted. I said, like, you guys don't know who I am. And I gave them my card, and I said, you should call these guys. They're lawyers. They'll tell you. They'll set you straight. And then when 3 lawyers show up, you get let out real quick.
Yeah.
But then I kind of realized, oh, wait a minute. But these are the guys I work for.
Yeah.
I kind of realized that, but I managed to get out of that. They're very lenient in Japan, kind of things, as I said, because it's not. I think the main reason is it's a genetic thing, because about half of Japanese have what's called Oriental flush. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard of that. Yes.
Right. So they can't properly metabolize alcohol.
Right.
And so it makes them very sick.
Okay.
So most people could never become really. It would be some people even with that do develop problems with alcohol.
Sure.
And in their case, it's really bad for them because the enzyme doesn't properly digest alcohol. But but most people couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising because they don't allow any other competing drugs, but it's very obvious from the way they use alcohol that they understand it to be a drug. They're not like the Italian. They're not have a few aperitifs or whatever. Usually, if they drink, they do it to get intoxicated.
Okay.
And therefore, it's it's very bad, considered to be really awful to be seen drinking during the day.
Okay.
You can't get off from work and have a few beers. You'll get fired. You can't go at lunch and down a few beers or have a few pints or whatever. You would get fired for that.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, and they fired a teacher for that recently. So yeah, so anyway, they have quite a different, but at the same time, it's ubiquitous. You'll never have any problems getting booze in Japan.
Well, that's interesting. I never really thought of it as a drinking society, although I guess I would think of them as drinking, at dinners and stuff, sake and I guess I had thought of them as working all the time and drinking after work is what was my impression.
Yeah, that's it. But when they drink, they drink to get drunk.
Okay.
So it's kind of more like, I guess, like Scandinavians that way. They don't think about drinking as they're not like the French, they're not like Italians.
Gotcha.
They don't,
Right.
There's not much. I mean, it's kind of changing because of course now Japan's really rapidly aging. But generally their idea of, for most people, drinking equals getting intoxicated to various degrees.
Okay.
Although, subsequently, what I found interesting, like most people, when you quit drinking and then you find out, so many people don't drink. Most people drink so little. And in Japan, it's a little tricky because, to an extent, it's kind of considered rude if you refuse drinking from people. I think that's kind of changing now. So people, do little tricks they'll take a sip or something, or pretend just to take a sip. If you're at a party, you can't have an empty glass because that's an invitation for somebody to fill your glass.
Right.
So, but I've been kind of lucky, as I said, with my timing because I finally, after being arrested and being handcuffed and having my legs taped together.
Yeah.
I came to the conclusion that, the jumping off point, kind of but I didn't quit drinking immediately. I just kind of wavered in this area. And then finally I had another kind of blackout and I thought, well, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's when I started going to AA in Japan, English-speaking AA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that pretty prevalent? Is it easy to find a meeting?
In Tokyo, yes. Yeah. They're on the internet. And so subsequently the number of people has greatly decreased, but that's basically because there's not as many kind of expat people anymore because two things, because one, the Lehman, after the economy collapsed in 2008, so a lot of financial people left, and then more people left again after the earthquake in 2011.
Okay.
So, compared to back then, a lot of people, the number of people going to meetings has dropped, and then also
Yeah.
Our fellowship is also very split now because at the time when I started, there was a few people doing the back to basics, the big book or whatever you want to call it. And then subsequently we had a person from the Pacific group.
Oh, really?
Come in. Yeah.
For English speaking AA?
English speaking.
Okay.
English speaking AA, but they're very involved in Japanese AA too.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. Japanese AA is kind of curious because so they have a competing kind of Japan-based sobriety group called Danshukai. And you hear a lot of different things. I mean, there's not good statistics on it. Sometimes I hear that this Danshukai is much larger than AA, and sometimes they're smaller than AA. I don't know. I've never really gone to investigate it myself, but I would say basically AA in Japan doesn't really stand much of a chance of really expanding because it's dominated by Christians in a society which is not Christian at all.
Right. Interesting.
So, yeah. The Japanese really don't. Well, all the meetings are in churches. So,
right.
I mean, and it's funny because one time this Pacific group person, she was complaining. She goes, all the Japanese people think you need to be a Christian to go. And then I told them, no, that's not the case. It's like, maybe you would try to learn something from that.
Yeah.
If that's what they're thinking, there might be a reason for that.
Yeah.
But they're very, it's just like, well, it's the same thing in like typical like mainstream AA where they're like, oh no, we're not religious. Now let's pray.
Yeah. Hold my hand as we say the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. Well, we're not. Well, that's the one thing that even the Pacific group people haven't been able to bring in is the Lord's Prayer.
Okay.
We only use the Serenity Prayer or sometimes some of the other big book prayers, but nobody uses the Lord's Prayer.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's just so obviously a Christian prayer.
Sure. Yeah.
That really surprised me when I heard about that debate in the United States. I was just like, "Are you serious?"
Oh man, yeah. I mean, 99. I'm in Missouri, and so 99%, I would say, of the meetings here close with the Lord's Prayer. I'm in Kansas City, which is a metropolitan area. They all say the Lord's Prayer here.
It's just like, well, that might be an interesting debate like 50 years ago, but come on, this is 2016.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. And it's kind of funny. I don't even bring it up, although I think I'm going to start being a little bit more vocal about it. First of all, I don't go to the regular meetings anymore, but I think I might bring it up at our area assembly or something that, hey, can we stop saying this prayer?
Well, it's totally, I mean, if you can't see that that's completely opposite of the message that you're trying to say, that you're like not religious and you're not any specific religion, you're trying to say you're not part of any sect, but our denomination, but come on.
They recite something right out of the New Testament. Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
It's like, there's, and then what's the great story in the big book? Well, say it in Jewish, They have the Jewish guy has this story, and he said, like, I don't like to say the Lord's Prayer, and it's just basically it's kind of dismissed as, well, you're just he kind of laughs at himself for being uptight.
Yeah. So you're saying there was a split in the fellowship then in Japan because of the back to basics people?
Yeah, I would say now we're kind of split into kind of three groups.
Okay. We
have back to basic and PG. The PG people even have their own meeting, and then we have the milquetoast kind of mainstream AA that probably well, it wouldn't be like mainstream from where you are.
Right.
But I mean, like if you were in New York or if you were in Los Angeles or someplace, or
Gotcha.
Yeah. It would be mainstream. So they have the Serenity Prayer. People tend not to talk about the spirituality so much, but still it comes up.
Sure.
They're very insistent on it. And then we have a freethinker meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of a definite minority.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
When did you start the Freethinkers meeting?
Well, I didn't start it, but I started going to it.
Mm-hmm.
It started off very small. It was just like me and this other woman,
mm-hmm.
and so I think that was in 2010. Okay. And then because, as I said, the fellowship split, and so one of the mainstream meetings at a Catholic expat church was going to fold, and that was in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And then we said, well, we'll take over. There's basically one person left. They said, fine, go ahead. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we kind of came into our own. So I think we've existed as a meeting since 2010,
mm-hmm.
2010,
mm-hmm.
but we've really come into our own as a meeting since 2012.
So what kind of meeting format do you use there?
Well, it's kind of, I don't know where they go, because I wasn't involved in starting the meeting, so I don't know where they got it from, but it's kind of evolved over time. Like, one thing was, at first we said, this is a secular meeting, there will be no prayers.
Oh, okay.
But that we've revised that subsequently. Okay. Now we say this is a secular meeting, there will be no group prayers.
Oh, okay. That's kind of good.
Because I thought that was kind of overbearing. Because, well, I mean, you could pray in your mind.
Sure. Yeah, you can't prevent someone.
Police. You could commune with your higher power all you want.
Right.
Just that we're not going to join you. You know.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, I mean, that's the whole Christian thing. I mean, they tell you to, Jesus said,
go pray quietly in your closet.
Go pray in a closet. Yeah. So I don't know why they always need to.
We started our meeting that way. We were kind of afraid when we started our meeting that we didn't want people to start coming there and expect to pray or make us start praying. So we were really clear. We did the agnostic preamble to let people know. And I think we even added in there, we do not pray. It's just simply because we were afraid that people were going to turn us into, try to change our meeting. But that never did happen. Yeah.
Well, actually, no, in the early days, we had to struggle to control our own meeting.
Really?
Because people would come in and they go, no, this is not how AA is done.
Okay, great. See, that's what I was afraid was going to happen here. Unfortunately, it didn't.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, because I guess the other people are focused, because I've heard people come in and they take over meetings,
Yeah.
But no one's tried to take over our meeting. And I think there's kind of the nature of it kind of changed maybe around 2014 about. Then the bulk of the people going there were non-believers. Mm-hmm. So, and we've never been able to get, it's ostensibly a bilingual meeting. Mm-hmm. We've never been able to get Japanese people to come consistently. Okay. They show up and they come for a bit. Mm-hmm. And we had people come, on and off, but the thing with the Japanese people is because they're used to the idea of religion as just a cultural thing. Okay. And so they don't really care one way or the other. Okay. And it's probably very frustrating to the true believers because Japanese people are often willing to give lip service to something for basically to fit in. Okay. So, yeah. But when push comes to shove, then they go like, well, actually, we don't believe in it. Okay. So, it's very frustrating for the Christian missionaries here. It's like the people are basically, it's kind of rude to say no, right? Right. So they say, I accept the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior.
Just to be polite.
Just basically. Yeah, it happens. It happens. Yeah. So sure. And then eventually, they have to kind of say, "Look, actually,
I don't believe that.
I don't really believe in. I just like your choir."
Right. So they don't have.
I'm here to practice my English.
So they don't really feel like the need for a secular meeting. Then, so are they just as comfortable at a regular AA meeting as they would be at a?
I don't know because, as I said, I mean, it's just been all the energy we could take just to keep ourselves together. Okay. And much less try to change Japanese AA. For the most part, as I said, it tends to be dominated by Christians, but mostly I think there's kind of a split now because they've started to have back to basic meetings in Japanese, and because a lot of Pacific group people were brought into the Pacific group in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
A lot of Japanese people who were there, and they're trying to bring that over to Japan now.
Wow.
But primarily, for the most part, they don't really use like literature.
Okay.
Japanese. I've only been to about a few Japanese meetings. My first sponsor was a big book thumper.
Mm-hmm.
He started like a big book kind of based Japanese meeting, but it was still it was still kind of, you know, soft.
Yeah.
Compared to other ones. Yeah, in my first year of recovery, I decided to become like, you know, a believer.
Oh, okay.
Well, basically, I was in a very unstable mental state, and particularly in the first weeks. Sure. And I had a lot of these things that I kind of thought were religious experiences. In reflection, no,
sure.
I don't think that anymore. But and also, I just really wanted to fit in, and basically being either soft or being an atheist, you don't fit in. Right? You can't. Right. You can't fit in a normal group. You know,
no, I was the same way, actually. I wasn't religious at all, but when I got to AA, it didn't take me long to start praying and talking about God.
Well, it's easy to do. It's also easy to do because I think it allows people. The one thing that's always attracted me, you know, because I also was in Toronto in 2014, and so that's when I really became hardcore, because I went to the Beyond Belief meetings in Toronto. Okay. And I met Roger C. and Joseph.
Oh, cool.
So that was because before that, I mean, we didn't really have. I think that when I came back, I think we had a lot better direction. Because before that, we actually did spend a lot of time. We would spend a lot of time talking about trashing religion and religious AA,
right?
Which I think we needed. I think we needed to do that, but that was kind of a phase we went through.
Isn't that interesting? Every single group, I think, goes through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, because it's so overbearing. I mean,
yeah, it is. You have to get it out of your system.
I mean, it's one of the funniest things that happened was one time. So I brought these alternative steps. I printed them out. I copied them down from the AA Agnostic site or from somewhere, and I printed them out, and then I brought them, and then we were very careful not to talk about the steps, because that's how the Toronto groups all got delisted. Right. And we can't really afford to be delisted, because it's very hard for us to function otherwise. Okay. We kind of rely on visitors.
Yeah. You guys do have a website, though. You guys have your own website.
Yes, we do. It doesn't really get a lot of traffic.
Yeah,
but, and then, so this woman who was very enamored with the 12 and 12, and then she told us, but one thing I didn't like about it, because it wasn't gender neutral, so I just went into my computer and I made a gender neutral version of the 12 and 12.
Oh, cool. Which
is kind of funny, but then... Yeah. But then, so we had these I had these the alternative steps that I'd printed up, and she says, "Oh, you can't have that here."
Okay.
What are you talking about? She goes, "That's not conference approved literature.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you're really allowed to keep it." And then we said, "Well, we made a group conscience to have this, and so we're gonna." But it's just it was so funny, because her whole thing was, "Oh, I love AA because you're free to do whatever you want,"
right.
And then it's you can't have that here. It's censorship. Oh, okay. You're free to do whatever you want within a certain confine.
Right. And that's such a misunderstanding too. That doesn't, in AA you can read whatever you want to. You really can. But so there's people around here that also think you can't read non-conference approved literature. That's completely false.
Well, we don't want to get in. We don't want to get into the debate.
Yeah. And
also, we're actually, not only are we the like a free thinker meeting, but we're the last topic main prime time or whatever topic discussion. We're the last. Actually, we are the last true topic discussion meeting in Tokyo.
Oh, okay.
That's another reason we don't use literature, because I believe that the topic discussion meetings are very valuable, but people give up on it because it takes energy.
Yeah.
They just just give us the topic. Just we don't care if it's taken from Daily Reflections, which is so super religious,
ridiculous.
It was funny. I tried to start a morning meeting using Joe C's book, and then it just wasn't taking off, and I just thought, well, it's not going to work out, and so I gave up on it after about 2 months. And then as soon as I gave up on it, and stopped going. They went to Daily Reflections.
Oh no!
It's like how ironic.
Yeah.
But they what they said is they didn't like Joe C's books because it demanded too much thinking.
Yeah, we like his book, but we sometimes laugh because we do have to think a lot when we read his stuff.
Well, I think as a reader, it's good, but yeah, for a meeting, it doesn't work because it doesn't compete with what we're used to. I think that's the main thing is people are used to the Daily Reflections where they just throw out a few ideas. Right. Primarily, they're all religious.
Exactly.
Particularly if you're in, in February, it's all second step stuff.
Right. Oh yeah, that used to drive me crazy. You have to sit through an entire month of one particular step or whatever.
Yeah, so we're kind of, and it's funny because a couple of times we have atheists who've come from other places and they're like, we love the big book. And I'm just like, there's some good stuff in there, obviously. Yeah. My take on it over time has just become, well, it's just too, you can't separate it out. I don't think you can use it discreetly. I was surprised in Toronto because they always were reading the the spirituality thing at the spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And I just don't even want to set up the big book as any kind of authority.
Right.
I just and I've kind of even departed more radically, and this is another thing, because we don't really want to, in our group, we kind of decided that we just let people pick their own kind of recovery.
Right.
And so we don't say, do the steps.
Yeah.
Or work the steps. It sounds like it's very horrible.
No, I agree.
It sounds horrible. It's it doesn't, as a verb, putting the word work and on the, anyway, just as a person who loves the English language, I object.
It's actually very freeing to have a meeting without some reading from something, because after a while, if you just have these readings, I mean, you kind of, they get repetitive after a while. And I went to a meeting once in New York where all they did is they had someone talk for 10 or 15 minutes, then everybody went around the room. And the meeting was all based upon what that person had to share. And I really liked that meeting. I thought, well, that's really cool, and I thought, that's, if I were to do something maybe in Kansas City, to do something like that someday. And they didn't read from any book or anything. Yeah.
I mean, that's what really, when I went to the first Beyond Belief meeting in Toronto, I mean, the experience just really blew me away because somebody put out the topic, can you take responsibility for your own recovery? Mm-hmm. Can you say that, I recovered based on my own resources kind of thing. And, that just blew me away. And then Roger C. shared, and he said, what you have to understand is this program was created by these people who thought God is everything and people are nothing.
Right. That's right.
And then I was like, wow. It's like being in an alternative world.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. Cause if you can go to a meeting where there's 40, 30 or 40 people.
Wow.
And they're all non-believers, varying stripes. There's one person there who would say she's a believer, and then she said, but she thought believer AA was bad.
Right. That's funny.
Well, no, we have that actually in Tokyo. We have a believer who comes to our meeting. He says it's the best. He says it's the best meeting.
Yeah. No, we did too for a little while. We had some believers come, but one of them got a little ticked off and didn't come anymore because we were going through a phase where we had some people come in who were upset with the traditional AA and they were they were venting a lot, and so it scared some people away, I think.
Yeah, we've had that experience too, but I think now what people appreciated about it is that I think because we're very non-judgmental, because we don't have any, I think basically it's because we developed this way where we don't have a fixed idea of recovery other than not drinking.
Right. Right.
Just something basic that you could, you can confirm.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing I don't like about it, because, what with the AA, because it was kind of good that I started with Big Book Thumper, because he was like, take action, do stuff, right? And belief isn't action.
No, I agree with that 100%.
Belief isn't any kind of action. And basically people giving you kudos for saying, okay, I believe.
Yeah.
It shouldn't really, because, I had a sponsee, and then he was saying all this stuff to me about, like, oh, Chris, I became an atheist. Like, I don't really care. Actually, I don't really, I'm not out to try to, to bring people around to my viewpoint.
Right.
I just hope people recover. Though recently I had a really heavy experience because I did a podcast interview for a secular podcast called Secular Sexuality.
Okay.
And the guy who runs it, Dr. Darrell Ray, he totally blew me away because he said, like, I can't believe you're, like, involved in AA because AA is horrible.
Right.
So it's like, what? It's like, those guys, they're totally unredeemable. But I'm trying to do this atheist that doesn't matter. It'll never work.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Whoa, I didn't realize there's that hostility. I don't know if that's is that widespread, because I think in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, with secular community, which is that kind of gives me pause, because the religious community gives huge support to AA generally.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never really been involved with the atheist movement or atheist community overall, but I did one time. I went to an atheist convention, I guess, in Omaha, Nebraska. And it's kind of funny. Neil deGrasse Tyson was there, and he gave a really wonderful talk and everything. And afterwards, he was up there, and you could go get his autograph. And anyway, so I was up there. I was all happy, hanging out with some people, waiting in line to get Neil deGrasse Tyson's autograph and everything. And people were drinking cocktails, and they were just having a great old time. And for whatever reason, I decided to tell all these people that were sitting there drinking their cocktails, these atheists at this atheist convention, that I was in AA.
Well, I mean,
and it was like, it was like I ruined their little cocktail hour, I guess. I didn't mean to do that. And then they looked at me like I may as well just told them I was a Southern Baptist or something. I was like so out of place. And they were just like, they couldn't believe it. I said, yeah, but it's agnostic AA and everything. And they thought, no, AA is horrible. It's a religion. And they wouldn't even kind of open their mind to the idea that we were doing something different, that we were trying to have a secular support of each other within Alcoholics Anonymous, but they just couldn't get it.
Yeah. Well, it kind of became obvious because I had a couple of email exchange with them, and they don't really understand. And I think this is quite typical, because like if you ever like watch a movie where there's AA in it, they impose this structure which doesn't exist, right? They have some guru guy. John, what do you? John, how did that make you feel? Kind of thing, which just doesn't, because it doesn't make sense, because it's so lacking in organization. So they think there must be this huge top-down thing, and I kind of try to say, like, we run our meeting, there's no God in it.
Right.
I mean, as I always say, like, well, you could talk about God if you want, but don't expect anybody to applaud. Right. There you go. I'm not against people. If you want to come in, if that's your thing. I mean, we've had a few people. One person told me that I was going to drink. I was in danger of drinking. It was quite. I don't think he quite got that we're like an atheist. I thought he was just thinking I'm just like a random atheist.
Right. Right. He understand he's in a room full of them.
Yeah, I don't think he quite. Well, that was still in the day when we were kind of struggling.
Okay.
And I mean, now that's the good thing is, like, it occasionally comes up, and I've been able to see, like, everybody's of course they approach it in different ways, but they're all that's why I use the term non-believer, right? They're not basing it out. And the other thing is, like, I've been trying to, one thing I've moved away from is I no longer talk about having a higher power, because for a while I was saying, like, my higher power is reality.
Yeah.
Which is good because you're not going to mess with reality.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
But it's, that's the kind of the thing is basically it's a rigged game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't want to get involved in that because, in the 12 and 12 where they say, well, you can start off with your group as a higher power.
Right.
Right. But that's not. But then you become God, and so then it's the equivocation, right?
Yeah.
They're using it, Well, the fact that you can get support from a group, there's nothing supernatural about it at all.
Right. Exactly.
That's just very. That was the funny thing about this, like Dr. Darrell Ray, is he's got like his own group. Which recovery from religion.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but they do kind of an AA thing, because he was very hostile. Like, as soon as if you're going to talk anything about AA, you're going to have to back it up with statistics.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And I go, well, I was thinking
we don't keep statistics.
Do you demand the same thing about your group? It's just because I don't know. Because the other thing was I could figure out is, with these secular people that are so hostile, is that they can't separate out that AA is not the 12 steps. It is not actually a step program, although it's become to be defined that way. And I guess, de facto, yeah, it is, because, most groups, if I shared like I'm sharing, I would normally, now I do. Mm-hmm. Now I do go to normal AA and I just lay it on the line because I kind of changed my opinion on that, because I used to be like, because it says in the big book, we avoid argument and retaliation.
Yeah.
We wouldn't treat sick people that way.
Right. Exactly. Right.
But now, kind of, because as I hear from other people, is basically, because there's so many people who maybe, I guess the first point is to say that we're here. It's kind of like the homosexual community and what they went through,
right?
Because you hear a lot about that, of course, in the secular movement. And I think that's important to say, no, we actually exist. We're here. Because I heard one person share at a meeting. They said, well, yeah, these agnostics are atheists. They recover, but basically they're very sad people and they usually kill themselves.
Exactly. I used to have a sponsor who used to tell me that.
What? I would say my recovery really took a more solid grounding after I went to Toronto and I became very active in agnostic AA.
Yeah.
Because I think, one, I became more forgiving of myself. Because, this is another thing, I guess, a lot of people who become secular, that, because people, and the religious people kind of ridicule us because they say, well, you don't believe in God. What more is there to talk about, right? Among yourselves, They're like, what do you guys do? You just all talk about there's God, yeah, that's totally right, because, a lot of my thinking, because I was raised religiously, and so it's hard to break away from it easily, but I think that was one step. So, I think I became much more comfortable with myself and, the way I'm living and my choices.
Yeah, I've had the same experience.
Yeah, and... yeah, and also, and I don't have any doubts. Yeah, one thing I always found very strange about being in AA, and I think something chemically changed in my mind, or I don't really know the reason for it, but I almost never experience any anxiety. It's very strange. I think, I'm not sure, because I think the main thing was because I had this fear of being an alcoholic.
Yeah.
which is now it's like the most cockamamie fear. And then I had a fear of I was going to go to hell. Yeah. One of the things that I found really interesting was, and sometimes I give this in my share, which in 2011, March 11th in Japan, there's a massive earthquake. Which I was in. And when it really got to quaking, the thought came to me is I could die right here and now.
Yeah.
And I found it it didn't really bother me. Well,
Yeah.
of course I don't want to die.
Right.
But I think I was able to reflect on the main thing that I could figure out was because I stopped drinking and then I started to do the things that I wanted to do or I thought about doing.
Uh-huh.
And so, because I'm living my life in that way, I think I'm much more comfortable with death. And then also, because although as I said, because I was raised religiously, but now I realize I'm just going to stop. I'm just not going to exist.
Right.
It's not a comforting thought.
No.
But on the other hand, there's nothing really to worry about,
No. Isn't it interesting though? Because I had the same thing. Although I wasn't raised religious, I still had that concept of hell. And then the whole idea of thinking about my non-existence was really freaky. But with me, it was like I got really interested in science and particularly with, cosmology. And, so, I don't know. I just kind of like being part of the universe, and I know the universe is someday the suns are going to, all the stars are going to burn out, and it's just the way things are, and I'm just part of nature, and I can accept that. So I'm okay with it, actually. So
yeah. So yeah, it's So and also accompanying the my. Except it was kind of funny because I can kind of remember the moment that I finally went back to being an atheist. I have to say, when I was drinking, I was not a very good atheist in the sense that basically it was just all reaction.
Yep.
It was like, I reject this, but there was nothing. I didn't try to find anything positive.
Right.
I was on YouTube. I just finished watching Jonathan Miller's The History of Disbelief, and then I thought, because I was kind of, like tweaking it and saying, well, yeah, okay, God concept, not likely, but there's something out there, or ultimate, Paul Tillich, ultimate concern, or whatever.
Right.
Try to fudge it, and then I just realized, no. And then I didn't really come out with it in the AA meetings until a couple of years later. But I mean, that's also a positive experience because I've been very surprised because a lot of people are very accepting of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of surprised me.
I had a hard time with it. I was like that too. I think I was very slow coming out as an atheist at my home group. I went to that group for 25 years as the guy who quoted the Big Book all the time. And, they weren't real happy. They weren't real accepting of me. They kept trying to get me, to start talking the way I used to talk. And it was kind of sad, really. But I never really openly said I'm an atheist. And what happened, I left the group and helped start this agnostic group. And I was gone for a year and I never heard from a single person. So I went back and I just wanted to let them know why I don't go to their meetings anymore. And I told them I just don't believe in God. I wasn't comfortable here with the way you guys were talking. And so I started this agnostic group. Y'all can come over and see us sometime. Well, some people were pretty nice about it, but a lot of people started talking about how only God can save us, and sometime there's going to be a time and place when no human power can save us, and all this kind of stuff. And then,
we'll just see, won't we?
Yeah. And then they closed with the Lord's Prayer, as I always do. And I was really nice. I stood up and I just stared straight ahead. But one guy just stared at me like a really mean, menacing stare. And, I couldn't believe it, but that was after 25 years of going to meetings at that group. And that's how they treated me because I didn't believe like they did.
Wow. Well,
yeah, so much for that.
I didn't really, because the nice thing about being in Tokyo, because we're such a small group, is usually every year we have a main kind of speaker meeting on Sunday night. And so usually every year, if you're, a sober person, then you would give your talk, right? And I think I decided from last year, I kind of came out and I was just very open about it, because previously I would mostly only talk about my drinking story. I didn't really talk much about my recovery because I didn't feel comfortable because it didn't fit in with what you're supposed to be doing, right? And and I was very surprised that people were very accepting.
Yeah.
And then last time I got, even more out. And so I don't really go to so many regular meetings anymore. But yeah, usually when I do, I'm out. And, it's interesting. I can kind of see I feel like sometimes like I'm planting a seed, because when people get really disturbed, it doesn't bother me, because I know that that's the start of the process, right? Not that I'm trying to, not that I'm, trying to convert anybody, right. But
but it is good to get out there, just to let people know that, you don't have to believe in God. You can be sober, and, it's not a big deal. And there's a lot of new people that need to hear that, I think.
Well, I just remember, because there's from the AA Agnostic site, there's like a connection where all the agnostic and atheist meetings are listed. Yep. I just remember, I think it was in 2014 or 2015 or early 2015. I can't quite remember, but I looked on it, and there was on AA Agnostica, there's now we have over 200 meetings or something like that. It just kind of blew me away, and I just shared that at the group. I said, we're we're not alone.
No, and now we have over 300.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I'm really looking forward, the next time I get to go to the U.S. And it's kind of funny, the other good thing about this meeting in Tokyo is, so locally, we've only got a consistent membership of about 5 or 10 people of various, ranging from, there could be a higher power, but I really don't care, or I'm kind of indifferent, or Buddhist, or whatever. Right. We always attract the Buddhists. They love us.
Yeah.
But anyway, but we get lots of visitors, and for a lot of people, it's like their first exposure.
Right.
And in the past, it was often very negative, as I said. A lot of people would say, I don't know if I like this.
That's what John says in Paris, too. It's the same thing. He gets there. Visitors come in, and they don't know they're getting a freethinker meeting, and sometimes they don't like it.
Yeah, but that's kind of more unusual. I think, maybe also because we picked the name Freethinker, which people don't really understand. But I think now probably more people are understanding that we're atheist or agnostic.
Right.
And then, but I think also because I think because most people are coming from the United States, and so society is rapidly changing there. Yeah, a lot of people were I remember we had this one guy who came for several meetings, and he goes, "I have to say, I didn't really know what you guys were talking about, but now I get it." And when I go to California, I'm going back to California, and I'm going to try to go to the atheist or agnostic meetings there.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I feel optimistic, even despite this kind of, I didn't realize the degree of hostility within the secular community. I mean, I can kind of understand it, because they're right to an extent, but I don't think they don't quite understand how.
They don't. It'd be interesting to reach out to them a little bit, just to try to educate them a little bit more. We have a huge secular organization here in Kansas City that I have often thought.
Kansas City Freethinkers.
Well, the Kansas City, it's called Oasis, and it's kind of like a secular. It's like a church for atheists, basically. They have a fellowship, and they meet every Sunday, and they have speakers and stuff. And I've often thought about reaching out to them just to educate them about Agnostic AA. And they're aware of us now, because we had some of them come to our meeting, some of them that were wanting to get some help with drinking, and they found out about our agnostic meetings, and they came to some. But I don't know. I'd like to
we've gotten a few people from because I'm involved in a skeptics group here in Tokyo. And we've had a few people come from the skeptics skeptics group. But yeah, it's unfortunate that and they're not wrong. But there's just this image that basically it's a very kind of religious.
And a lot of the language that we use, even in our secular meetings, the words, like if you hear the words higher power, powerless, unmanageable, just all kinds of language that we use that people think, and even everything we do, even when we introduce ourselves as my name is so and so, I'm an alcoholic. We have a lot of customs and habits, and that just kind of a little freaky to someone if they're a free thinker, or if they're wary about cult behavior or whatever. Well, I don't think we're a cult, but we act kind of like one sometimes.
Right. I mean, well, those are kind of very deeply, fundamental things. But I think there, once again, there's an understanding, because they think, like, if you're identifying yourself as an alcoholic, that you think of yourself then as a broken person.
Right.
I think that's their misunderstanding of it. For me, it's kind of more of an empowerment. I see it, like, yes, that's part of my experience, but it's something that I built strength from.
Yep.
I think that's what they kind of miss out on.
Yep, I agree with that.
Wow.
Yeah, we did cover a lot of territory. This is going to be an interesting podcast, I think, for people to listen to. And I thank you very much, Chris, for doing this. It was so nice to talk to you. And I'm going to mention to Joe and Roger that I talked to you. I didn't know that you got to meet them. That's so cool.
Yes.
Roger's going to be in Kansas City, August the 6th.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll remember me, but yeah, I'm in regular contact with Joe C.
Cool.
So yeah, okay. Well, you have a good rest of the night or whatever it is.
You too. Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the program. We'll be back again real soon with another interesting guest. And until then, you be well and take care.